There's a train a-coming. You don't need no baggage, you just get on board. All you need is faith to it be Susan. You don't need no ticket, you just thank the Lord, yeah, yeah.
All right, hey, welcome back. I'm David Fuqua. This is New South Christian Podcast. And today we have got a really interesting young man. I've had this gentleman in macroeconomics for a semester. His name's Aiden. I'm going to let him introduce himself and we'll go ahead and get started. So go for it, Aiden.
Hello, my name is Aiden Humphrey. I am a second year student here at Vol State Community College. I use the middle college program. And like he said, I've been in his class for about a semester.
There you go. And he's still upright, so he's okay. He hadn't gotten depressed and tried to commit suicide off the Caudell building yet. So anyway, but I've been looking forward to it. We've had a lot of women on the show. We know gender plays, obviously your perspective is a little bit different. So a couple things just to kind of get us started. Obviously, this is called New South Christian, so we're talking about maybe new people that have moved here, maybe have different beliefs, and obviously we're focusing maybe on Generation Z, which is your group.
Yep.
So just how would you introduce yourself? Like if I just met you, spiritual, religious, I mean, I don't know, kind of which direction are you coming from? So.
I would like to say that I'm a spiritual person, that I let religion go into my decisions. However, I like to tell people that I'm not as close with God as I'd like to be because I don't think you'll ever be as close as you want to be, but you always got to try to keep getting closer.
Oh, okay. Well, that's a different take than I've heard. But to get some of the negative stuff out of the way, because I know there's some stuff you shared with me you'd really like to talk about, but one of the things that's really blown my mind in the process of doing this is all the negative, like, there'll be articles that say Generation Z is killing religion, it's killing God. There's like 40% of people identify themselves as nuns. They're spiritual but not religious. God may exist or some supreme being, but it's not the God that's defined in the Bible as far as that goes. And then there's a whole host of things about, the world's not getting better. It's not going to get any better. I'm depressed, anxiety, suicides at all-time level. So, I mean, you're a young guy. I had you in class. You're a good student. I mean, when you read or hear all that stuff, I mean, how do you react to that?
So I would like to say that I think that what you're reading is partially correct. I do believe that the traditional Christian going to church kind of faith is slowly on the decline. And I tell people that I like to attribute it to a rise in technology and individualism. Well, it's a great thing. Treating yourself as the most important being in the universe. Right. Naturally, if you think of yourself before anything else, why would you have a need for a creator and anything to worship? So what you're saying, I believe, is partially correct, how traditional going to church, Christianity and stuff's on the decline. However, you and I were talking right before we started recording that there's been pockets of revivals that are just incredible. And so I think that while faith in traditional institutions, and even you'll be seeing that, like I said, individualism or just people just choosing not to believe in anything, more scientific approach if you want to get into that. But I think that there is still a strong Christian movement going through the people because people are, especially in today's generation, we're longing for anything to believe in.
Yeah. Well, but that's the other thing that blows my mind. A lot of young people have sat here and talked about how, I don't trust religion. I don't trust pastors. That kind of jumps out at me. But then how a lot of them don't like the way the church is kind of set up. It's like a performance-based event. A certain number of songs done on a stage with sometimes fog machines or whatever. Then a certain message that goes a certain amount of time. Then discussing the tithe for a certain amount of time. And then you wrap up a certain amount of time. It's like a production. Instead of the congregation, the spirit flowing out among the people, it's like a performance as opposed to an experience. And they talk about, I want to have an experience with God. I don't want you to talk to me about God. I want to have a true experience with God.
Yep.
And they argue that the mega churches, a lot of those, you don't get that.
Yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying on that. like I've been to big churches for almost my entire life, and you're right. You know, you got the full rock band up on stage. You got dozens of instruments all performing, and it's truly an amazing spectacle. Just from a production value, that is a amazing church. And then you get your pastor who goes up. He starts talking, And I mean, I know it's cliche because it's what they're doing, but it's a little preachy. They're just yelling out things into a big dark audience where you can't see beyond the spotlight. And I mean, I've never been one for I like someone to tell me how to do something. I've been I want you to kind of be a guide, show me, but then ultimately, if anyone's gonna have a connection, like give me a connection with God, I want to be the one that knows how to go have that connection.
Yeah,
exactly.
Well, good. Well, I want to ask you a gender question real quick.
All right.
I love to ask these two questions right here, and then we'll get into some stuff you wanted to share. One of them has to do with women. Women have always been the anchor of the church. And there was a young lady I had from Canada on the last podcast that we did, really strong in her faith and et cetera. And I asked her about it. And she agreed. There's a lot of women leaving the church in droves that are very unhappy about what's going on. And they've always been the anchor to the church. So, I mean, what do you think's going on? Why do you think women are leaving?
I mean, I'm really glad you asked that because in my life recently, a very close friend, a woman who I'm very close with, she and I, we went to high school together. We became friends freshman year, and we really stuck close. But she had always been an unbeliever. Right. And that never really got in the way of our friendship, and we became extremely close. And she went off to college, and she and I lost contact for a month or two. You know, she's trying to just settle into her new life.
Sure.
The first thing she tells me when we finally reestablish contact is that she's a Christian now and she's being baptized. And I mean, as much as you hear it, it is a night and day shift with her. She's always been a very enlightened thinker. She thinks very hard, much more than I do. And I always act on impulse, but she'll make a whole table of why she should or shouldn't do something. And now seeing that religion plays into it with her, it is fantastic. So that's just an example of a woman in the church that she's convinced. Like whenever she comes into town, she convinces me to go to church with her, and it's phenomenal. She's a very spiritual person, and she helps guide others in the religion as well. So I think it's wonderful.
Yeah, but see, this article though took the tack that for some reason women are leaving in droves. Now, the young lady that I had on before, it's that whole argument: can women be in positions of leadership over men? And some people, you know, translate that traditionally that the Bible says no, men are to be an authority over and women are not. Then I've had other people on here and say, well, that's not true. You can read many parts of the Bible where women have had those roles. But then you look at America. I mean, I teach economics. Since the early 1980s, there's more women going to college than men. Obviously, the economic gains of women, the political gains, and then the fact that your generation is supposed to be the social justice generation. So something's going on that these women are fleeing. And the reason I asked you, obviously you're a male like me, is I was curious about your perspective, because when I ask women that, they have an immediate answer. And there's things that they don't like that's going on in the church and feel like they're getting left out. And I'm wondering, can the modern church afford to lose that anchor?
Well, I think it depends on if we're viewing the church as the structure, such as like the building, the people that work there, or if we're viewing the church as more as the body, like you were talking about. Because I think there is definite position for women to lead in the body. Just that friend I was telling you about, she's convincing me of things that that even a pastor hasn't been able to get through to me on religion. It's been a very helpful experience reestablishing contact with her. And so while women may not traditionally hold leadership roles, pastor, you know, just roles in the church like that, I think the church as a body, there's definitely a place for women. I don't think it matters if you're a male or a woman. Leading a body of people, I think it more so matters, do you know what the Spirit of God is, and can you help others develop a relationship with them?
Oh, I agree with you 100%. All right, this other one I want to get out of the way, because to me it doesn't fit you, but I really don't know you. A lot of people have sat up here and they've talked about that mental health is one of the biggest things facing your generation, not just because of the pandemic. I guess it was coming anyway. That just put it on like turbo blast. But it's been strange to me because I've already a preconceived notion of you from having you in class. You seem to be a very well-adjusted person. You seem to be a very self-confident person. Seem to be that. But then I'll get people on the podcast and they'll talk about loneliness, depression, anxiety, people in their family planning suicide, committing suicide.
Yeah.
So where are you on that spectrum? I mean, if you tell me that, I'm going to be freaking out and shocked. I'll be honest with you. I don't view you that way.
When it comes down to it, I used to, and I think I've gotten a more mature understanding of it. I used to struggle a lot with loneliness when it comes down to, especially in the relationship aspect of, finding the quote unquote perfect woman that you want to be with.
Right.
And what was really onsetting that is it was freshman, sophomore year of high school, was especially when I was feeling down about this, but it's always been kind of in the back of my mind, where you see people getting together, and of course in our age, everything's digital. You can't open your phone without seeing, she said, he said, they're all together, stuff like that.
Absolutely.
And it was a struggle for me for a long time because time and time again, you see somebody and you're like, oh, they're attractive. You try to talk to them, and especially in today's culture, it's a very if someone loses feelings for you, you'll know like that, and they'll just stop replying to you, all things like that. And I would go home sometimes, and I would just think, and I would be like, does nobody want me? Am I not special? I see him and her, and then you go into the teenagers' mind. I was like, oh, well, he does this and she does that. They're worse people than me, and you don't want to fall down that rabbit hole in the slightest. Never compare yourself to someone else. Yeah. But eventually, you have to establish to help me with loneliness. What I did is I realized that I was trying to put all my confidence in myself on how do other people view me, to the point where I never realized how do I view myself,
Sure.
And so especially when I left high school, and let me tell you, leaving high school early was an excellent decision. High school is a cesspool of just negative thoughts brewing on you because
I'm sorry to laugh, but
you're okay. You're wonderful.
I haven't seen the cesspool of negative ideas, but I'm having flashbacks. Go for it.
What I'm thinking of is more so in the student life, just being a fellow student and just seeing, like I said, all the relationships or the friendships, all these things forming around you. High school is a very social-oriented thing.
Right.
And so when you're not in the quote-unquote most talked about or popular circle where you're running, it becomes sad, and you feel really alone. You could be surrounded and still have nobody that you feel close with.
Well, but that's the reason why I was so shocked, because it called you the loneliest generation. But then I guess projecting from my age group, I'm looking at you with all these social tools, ways that you can stay connected that I never could. Like, I grew up living in Europe because my dad was in the military. So whatever friends I had here, they're over. I went to 5 different high schools. There was no connection with people when you left. You're going to sit and write snail mail to each other? That's not going to happen. So you had to find new friends wherever you were located. And then I look at you guys. You're able to connect, stay connected in eternity and many different platforms, but you're the loneliest. So I can't understand why.
And I think it's the fact that we're so connected.
So you're over-connected?
I think that we're over-connected, yes.
That doesn't make sense. That doesn't compute.
Well, I know for me, I have probably about 200-300 contacts in my phone of just, people that I like to talk to.
Okay.
And then I never talk to anybody in them except the same about 10, 12 people. And I feel like it's like that for a lot of other people. Or you'll go on social media and you'll see, somebody that you follow's posts. But do you ever... I mean, it's very rare for you to see that somebody posted something, and instead of just hitting a heart or a thumbs up button, that you reach out and you're like, well, how have you been? Do you want to go talk? And I feel like connection, it's too impersonal these days. You don't make friends face to face. You'll see on your phone that, well, she's a friend of her. So you could say, oh, I got 1,000 friends. Well, how many of them do you talk to on a regular basis?
Right.
How many do you talk?
And what do you define as a true
Exactly.
friend, as far as that? Okay. Well, I want to get to the stuff because I know you wanted to talk about this. You had mentioned it to me. When I have people on here, heaven and hell is an interesting discussion that we haven't explored too deeply. And I think I was just going to ask you real quickly, in your experience in church, have you attended churches that talk about hell? Because my experience has been, it's like hell doesn't exist anymore. It's not customer friendly. So I just wanted to get your reaction to that to start, and then we'll go wherever you want to go.
Well, churches love to talk about heaven. They love to talk about the light and the singing, and you'll be eternally happy.
Yeah.
But to acknowledge heaven, you must also acknowledge that there is a hell, and I feel like that's not talked about enough that there is an eternal punishment, that you can't pick and choose what you believe in the Bible.
Okay.
You can't, and it's weird because I'll talk to, some Christians and they'll be very excited about, oh, when I die, I'm going to go off to heaven. And then they'll meet an unbeliever and they'll be like, well, that's sad, that they're going to hell. And I've always been like, no, I want to try to bring them with me. If there's
I think, isn't that the great commandment? Am I not supposed to be out trying to
if there's
win
a party
people?
going on. Exactly. If there's a party going on, I want to bring them with me.
Sure. What is it? The road is narrow, but the gate is wide.
Exactly.
Headed to hell.
Exactly.
Well, what is hell to you? Describe your hell, or what you see hell being.
Well, when I was growing up, I believed it was very much just a pit of fire. Imagine just a giant bonfire burning forever.
Okay.
And I'm sure that's a lot of people's belief in it.
Okay.
And then as I started getting more involved, I wrote down here that in the Bible, hell is referred to as a shadowy place or a place of sleep called, I don't know if I'm pronouncing this correctly, but I think it's pronounced Sheol. And it was also a valley outside of either Jerusalem or one of the major cities, and people would refer it to that. And it was a place where there was a lot of hedonism and idol worship, and just terrible murders, all kinds of things like that.
Right.
And so they would compare hell to that. And I think that the pit of fire, or like Dante wrote about, the layers and all the weird, wacky punishments. I think that, just like comparing it to Sheol or the valley outside, was to give humans a physical something to tie their mind to what hell is like.
Okay.
To think of it as, well, what this is, so you can connect,
Sure.
bad place. For me, I think that hell is a more existential. I think it is more of a place of darkness, because if heaven is completely filled by the light of God, there's no sun or stars in heaven. It's
Right.
only the light of God. Hell is just the absence of God.
Opposite. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
And so if I was going to describe it as a physical place, I would think of it as a dark, bleak, horrible place where the feelings of loneliness, like the things I was talking about, is just amplified, because you have nobody there. It is, even when I was in my darkest time, I was like, well, I still have church. I still got God. I can turn to Him.
Right.
I cannot imagine what it'd be like to go through that loneliest period in my life and not have it, just to know that you're 100% alone.
So then, but you started off with the idea, we both acknowledge churches steer clear
Churches
of
do
it.
not
So
like to
it's
talk about it.
I hate to be this blunt, but is the church just a business and I don't want to scare off customers? You said you want to go into sales and marketing. What would you tell a pastor of a church today when it comes to, like you said, if you're going to preach the one part of it, heaven, do you need to do the other part? You're the marketing advisor for the church that you go to. You call the pastor in and say, okay, here you go. You're just not hitting hell enough.
I'm gonna be blunt that your numbers will not soar. You will not get a giant congregation.
I think there's going to be an exodus out the back of the building.
But it comes down to just the old idea. Do I want to tell you what you want to know, or do I want to tell you what you need to know?
But is that what the current church is doing? Look,
I don't feel so.
Think about the name of this podcast. It's called New South Christians.
Yep.
Okay, that was from a take that this is the original Bible. I call it the buckle of the Bible Belt. So if you go back to my grandmother, you go split hell wide open, son. I mean, hell was real. It was talked about. It was, poked at you. It was told to you. I mean, there was no hedging about. The discussion of hell probably happened more in heaven. And now you evolve, or devolve, depending on your point of view. And now I'm sitting here in this New South, listening to you talk, and the churches I've experienced here locally, I'm not sure hell's even discussed or mentioned. Maybe it doesn't exist.
It certainly exists, but it's just never talked about. And
So you would advise the pastor, look, you're going to lose some numbers.
I would advise
him. We got
him,
to stay true to the Bible. But so how about your generation? How do they respond to hell? Or do you think they will?
The idea of being presented with hell, is that what you mean?
Yeah. So let's say the Church of Aiden is going to do it right, the way you interpret the Bible, that you have to teach one, you have to teach the other. This is your generation. It's the Generation Z Church of Aiden. How are you going to handle it?
I like to think that...
Or how do you think they're going to handle it?
How would others handle it? Well, I mean, we all know the saying of "I'll see you in hell" or stuff that you'll tell people, and so there's already a stigma in it that yes, it's the quote unquote bad place, but it's also just one of two destinations. Some people truly believe flip a coin and that's where I'll end up.
Oh man!
And so what what I would try to tell people is you can control how that coin is flipped, but you really want it to land on heads. And I would really try to get people to understand that. And you don't have to be, all fire and brimstone, standing up at the pulpit yelling, "You're going here, you're going here, you're going here."
Yeah.
Because really, does anyone yelling at you ever truly help any situation?
Good point.
It's more so you want to educate, and because ultimately I cannot control if others choose to go to heaven or want to go to hell, because if they have the facts and it's like, well, if I do this, I will certainly end up either here or here.
Yeah.
But what you got to do is you have the obligation to educate, but everyone has the free will to choose.
Well, I'll tell you a revelation. My brother is a trained pastor, and one of the things I'll be honest, I can't stand to start discussing spiritual questions like this with him. One, he reads the Bible through multiple times a year. He's got it memorized. He knows it. But he's one of the most depressing people I've ever met. It's, David, do you know how many people are going to burn in hell? How many people sitting in churches now are not going to make it because of these? In other words, you need to preach it. It's what you're required to do. But then I get so depressed hearing him. If he had an active church right now, I don't know that I'd want to go to it. So I'm thinking of your generation, because we always make assumptions about them. Would they handle the discussion of hell? Like you said, I don't want to be yelled at, but is the discussion of hell going to play the role that it should be, that we should avoid it at all cost?
I think that you need to approach it in there's a very thin line that you can tread, because you don't want.
That's what I'm asking.
Exactly,
You're
yeah.
the Generation Z. How do you do that line but do justice to it?
You need to approach it with an air of seriousness,
Right.
without trying to, and this is going to sound odd, but without trying to preach it.
Or scare the hell out of them?
Yeah, exactly. Ha!
There you
I see
go.
what you did
Play
there.
on words.
But what you're going to want to do is you don't come, because I tell you this, there is nothing that my generation hates more than an overly religious person or a overly believing in too much of anything person, not just religion, coming and saying, you're wrong and here's why you're wrong.
Okay.
What you're going to want to do is unobjectively, you just want to say, well, here's what the Bible says about it. Now, I know you might not believe in the Bible, but let's have a discussion about it. Sit down and have a civil discussion. But all too often, especially in the South, we are in fire and brimstone territory, my friend. So it is a very rare that I ever hear someone discuss about it without someone standing up and screaming, well, then you're going to hell, and just storming off.
Exactly. Well, let's do the flip side now. We've done the negative. What's heaven?
To
you, I mean, if you had to describe heaven or what you believe heaven is, what do you think?
Well, if I believe hell is the place of darkness, I believe heaven is eternal light.
Right.
The Bible talks about it being eternal life, and to go on the loneliness idea, I think it's eternal companionship. You are there with your Creator. I cannot imagine, and this is concepts that the human mind was not made to fathom. If the world and the universe is an ocean of knowledge, our brains are just teacups.
Sure. Okay.
What I like to tell people is, imagine sitting down with the one that created you, and not just physically like your parents are. Just imagine the one that had a purpose for you. And it's like you said, that I'll sit down and he'll say, millions of years I've started this right here, and you were just a stepping stool in my grand plan.
Right.
But let me show you how much you did.
Right.
And I think it's incredible. You are sitting with the being that created just basic concepts like time and existence, and it's unfathomable, really.
Now, do you think family members that will recognize? I've heard people talk about we'll spiritual bodies, but I'll recognize you, and I'll recognize, but there's no hate, there's no negativity of any kind, way, shape, or form. It's just pure love, pure all those things. And then Billy Graham, I saw in an interview once, said he believed that we would move between the planets at the speed of thought. That's incredible. That you're not going to be laying under a palm tree having somebody, wave, that you'll do things. You're not just idle. And
that's what I like to think it is, because I have people that believe that, heaven is an eternity, on your knees and worshiping. And, they say that's paradise. And for me, that doesn't sound bad. I'm not getting pride or something. But I feel like heaven is probably more like just getting to know the universe, and walking one-on-one with God, which is odd because, how can he walk one-on-one with everyone? But this this is the
Right.
creator of the universe. Simple laws like physics don't apply to him.
Yeah, you know, to be very honest with you, I haven't shared this very much because I've always tried to make the podcast about the person on here. But you know, one of the things that drove me to do this podcast was the pandemic. You were talking about loneliness. For me, it forced me to be alone. I never liked being alone.
Nope.
I mean, think about it. I teach. I'm an extrovert. I love being around students. But all of a sudden, I'm at home and I'm on Zoom. I hate Zoom. I hate online. The only place I go really is to Lowe's. And I'm sitting here and man, you're starting to climb the walls, but then you start, praying, reaching out, trying to understand what's going on. The fear part comes in. My parents are older, you're worried about them dying. But anyway, in the process of all that, I started reading the stuff about, why am I here?
Exactly.
What is and if there's eternity, I'm here but a flicker in a moment
Exactly,
in time.
yeah.
So what do I need to be doing? I need to get busy. And a lot of what we're doing here, talking about, really came out of that loneliness of that time. And so I just think about heaven now totally different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that you're correct, especially I really, what you said really resonated, that we're just a flicker in eternity.
Yeah.
Because that was something that I was kind of told that by a close friend. He was once like, we were just sitting around, and it was one of those backyard around the glass table conversations near a fire. So it was 3-hour conversation.
Sure.
We've just been sitting there, and he says, if the universe is infinite and all that stuff, and we just live on a single rock, and time is infinite, we're just like, we're just here and gone.
Yeah, exactly.
And he was a very, and he's a spiritual man, but he said, then what's the point of everything, And I think he even might have picked up a rock and thrown it. And he said, what's the significance? Why shouldn't I have thrown that? And but I feel that, like I said, you're here for a purpose.
Right.
And as insignificant as it may seem in the grand scheme of things, you are equally significant to God, but insignificant to the universe. And it's very weird to feel.
Well, now you've opened up, because I know we're getting close to the end of time here. Oh, sorry on that play on words, but we're getting close to the end. So what is the calling of Aiden?
I cannot begin to understand it.
Right.
Like you said, just things will line up as you go through your life. Like even this podcast coming into creation, so many doors had to be opened.
Absolutely.
That I feel that if there is a will, and that the way will be made for me. I just gotta listen and follow what God wants me to do.
Well, then let me ask you a couple things and we'll wrap up. So a lot of the stuff that's in the research that I read is really, I walked away feeling very negative about it. But at the same time, it's like I became aware of it too.
Yep.
So the awareness and then the reality of it. But let's say you're doing a church.
Yep.
The Church of Aiden, right? The stuff I've read, people want authentic. People want community. They want, to be a part. They're less a show, kind of like you were talking about the rock concert and stuff like that. What will it take? Because a lot of people also say that your generation is the generation before the return of God, and that you're not going to be the one that destroys God. You're going to be the one that saves the church.
Yep.
So describe the Church of Aiden for me. Let's say your calling is to lead that next spiritual revolution like at Asbury or the Jesus Revolution movement of the late 70s or late 60s, early 70s.
So I would once again defer back to that female friend that she told me that I invited her to come to my church. Like I said, it's a mega church. And she really, she helped me reevaluate my situation and opinions on the church, because she said, and I think I'm saying verbatim, that it's so big that there's no personal connection.
Okay.
And for me, I would think that you need a church where there's not just one pastor that talks to everyone. I think that a church should be, yes, there's a pastor that kind of he jumps the discussion going, but I think it should be more led by the congregation, the actual body of the church. They're the ones that are going, and going out into the world. You got to have a church that's focused on not just showing up for what's essentially a class one Sunday a week, but you need to have a church that more so they go out and do works in the community for 6 days, and then they come together and it's, all right, well, what did you do and how are you furthering not the church's agenda, but the agenda of God?
Right. Yeah, it's weird that you described that, because I'm going to run through these real quick right here.
Yeah.
This is what was in an article talking about the church that Gen Z wants. Less performance, more presence. Okay, as far as that goes. I want to experience God. I don't want somebody to just talk to me about God. I want to actually have an experience with God.
Yep.
Here's another one: less production, more participation. So if all right, so here we are, back rolling again. Minor technical difficulty. So anyway, so we're going to design the Church of Aiden to bring Gen Z, because what I was saying beforehand, a lot of articles are really negative about your generation, say you're killing God, you're destroying. In other words, you're the worst thing that's happened to religion. Yep. But then I, based on this experience and other things I've read, look at you as the potential savior of religion. In other words, you're the biggest generation coming, you're the best educated, you're best socially connected, you care, your social justice views are unbelievable. There's so many positives. You think global warming does exist, does need to be addressed.
Yep.
Government, your participation in voting is off the record. And so everybody knows, in a way, it's kind of like we're demonizing you for being big and coming next and being different. But then at the same time, if I take the other approach, let's look at the positives and say these guys are the savior of what's coming. So in that environment, you're the Gen Z person, not me. How do we design the Church of Aiden to reach the lost, to reach your generation, and to be the vehicle that, ushers in the end, for lack of a better word? How do I design that church to get your people in?
Simply put, I can dress it up however you want it, but in the end, it has to be the congregation. Can't be the pastor. It can't be the programs. Well, it can be the programs the church is offering, but I mean, like how many churches have coffee shops and loud bands and stuff. It can't be any of that. The reason you should go to church and go out into your community is you want to spread God, and that's what I would try to get across in this fictional church that we're making. That you need. It's not the pastor, it's you. You are the hands and feet of God, as it's said in the Bible. Right. And you need to go out there and live like it, not just a student listening to a teacher.
Right. So do you think that? I mean, but you're obviously going to talk about hell in your church, and you're going to talk about heaven. And are you going to, I mean, I don't know, is church just a refiring on Sunday, and then during the week you have maybe smaller groups in the community?
Definitely.
And then you just go out from there?
Definitely.
Yeah. Because, when I've been to big churches, and I'm a massive extrovert, you kind of feel left out.
Yes.
It's hard to plug in. They always talk about plugging in, as far as that goes. But it's hard to have that experience with God instead of the others. All right. Any other things in the design?
No, really. I think you bring the congregation together, and then through them, that will be your ultimate design.
Okay. All right. Now, I wasn't going to do this, but it just jumped in my head. It wouldn't be fair if I don't. I'm going to give you a tough question.
All right.
Especially for your generation. How in the Church of Aiden do you handle the LGBTQI question?
And that's where we get into it. I got to think very hard about this one.
Why? See, that's... Go for it.
We're not called to judge,
is
what I would say. There is the teachings of the Bible, but I think that's up for the people themselves to read. That's for them to interpret. I am nowhere near a biblical expert, and I would argue that I don't think many pastors are biblical experts, because the teachings can be interpreted 1,000 ways. What I would say is we'd never turn anybody away. You can't, and you would never judge anybody based on how they live their lifestyle. Some of my best friends in the world are lesbian or bisexual.
Right.
And when we're together, they know I believe something, but they also know that I'm not going to throw scripture and stuff at them. I'll tell them that the way that you live your lifestyle doesn't exactly align with my religion, but that doesn't mean I don't think you're a good person. And so I don't think I would turn anybody away. And I also, since we're talking about hell, I wouldn't club them over the head repeatedly saying you're going to hell.
I was
because
getting
of what
ready
you were
to
going to
ask
say.
You that. I wasn't going to let you off the hook.
I saw it firing up.
You saw me going there, huh? Because that's the first thing I'm thinking. Well, you just talked about hell.
Exactly.
And if Grandma was here, the old school.
Exactly.
This is the old South.
Like I said, you're gonna
split hell wide open, son.
Exactly. You'll present people with the facts, what the Bible teaches. Then you'll present about what heaven is, what hell is, and then you'll go from there. Really,
Right.
it's not my place to say where you're going to end up.
And I'm not going to be standing next to you at the judgment. So,
Exactly.
yeah,
So
as far
it's-
as that goes. All right. Well, before we leave, always end on a positive note. Is there anything you want to share on the way out the door? I mean, you're not depressed. You're looking good. Graduating in May, going to Western, graduating 2 years early, saving
Exactly.
a ton of money for the folks. I mean,
I'm just ready to go out and see what I can do in this world. You know,
Okay.
whole life I've been told that you go to school at this time, you go to work at this time, all things like that. And yes, I'm going off to another school where I have to be there at certain times. But what
Sure.
I'm saying is I will be independent out in the world, and I just can't wait to see what my calling is.
well,
So,
I
yeah.
am too. All right. Well, listen, that's it for us today. I want to thank Aiden. As I tell everybody that's been on the show, we did not meet by accident. There's a reason we came together. And I wasn't sure where we were going to go with the whole hell discussion, but it turned out to be fantastic. So thanks a lot. And hey, if you enjoy what you're watching, recommend it to some people and be glad to hear from you. Have a happy day.
People get ready, there's a train a-coming. You don't need no baggage, you just get on board. All you need is faith to it be so humming. You don't need no ticket, you just thank the Lord.